When Sonic was first shown to the world, everyone collectively had several questions on their minds. Because honestly, looking at this, who wouldn't? This blue devil just demands intrigue. I mean, look at how smug he is. Sonic best game ever? Can he out-cute Mario? And my personal favourite... well, I'm not saying that. Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm sure you're familiar. He's fast, blue, got a heart of gold and a head full of attitude. The guy's been running through loops and smashing robots for 3 decades at this point. But most of all, he spin-dashed his way into the hearts of millions all around the world. Sonic entered my life when I was 5 years old, and ever since he's played a big part in shaping who I am today. From his soundtracks I'm constantly humming, to his gallery of friends and foes that inspire me creatively, to friendships started just because of a shared interest in Sonic. So you'd be surprised to know that in terms of actually playing his games, I've barely beat any. That's something I'd like to change. So come with me as we take a look back at the game which started it all, the Mega Drive premier platformer, Sonic the Hedgehog. In 1990, gaming company Sega, who were best known at the time for arcade hits like Hang On or Outrun, decided that they would hold an internal design competition to create a new mascot for the company to be featured in an upcoming game. Many designs were considered, some of which would go on to be used in various ways later on, but it was Naoto Oshima who ended up winning, with his blue hedgehog named Mr. Needlemouse. But since Sega actually wanted this game to sell, they changed his name to Sonic, though this was not Oshima's first attempt at a design either. He originally came up with a pair of brothers, who ran through loops and fought the boss of Nightmare World, though this would get scrapped in favour of Sonic. A few elements were lifted from his old idea however, such as a blue spiky haired protagonist, and of course, the iconic loops. The final release of Sonic the Hedgehog hit the Sega Genesis in the US on June 23rd, 1991, then in other territories the following July. The game flew off the shelves just as fast as Sonic himself, and would go on to become the #1 bestseller on the console. This would make sense, not just because it later became a pack-in title, but because this game was the console's killer app. It was the reason you bought a Genesis, alongside the sequels that followed. Digging up old magazine coverage from the time of its release, the press definitely advertised Sonic as a direct competitor to Mario. We all know that part of the motivation behind his creation was to rival Mario, of Sega's own headlining mascot, and the fact I'm sitting here talking about Sonic some 30 years later is a testament to how successful Sega was at this task. Some even likened Sega and Nintendo's rivalry at the time to Coke vs Pepsi, and I have to agree with that comparison, if only for the prominence of red and blue on both sides. Taking a look at the box of the game, one thing that immediately sticks out to me is that there's no mention of the story whatsoever. It just talks about how fast Sonic is, and lists some of the things you'll be doing in the game. For that sweet lore, you'll need to turn to the pages of the manual inside. Dr. Ivo Robotnik, the mad scientist, is snatching innocent animals and turning them into evil robots. Only one tough dude can put an end to the demented scientist's fiendish scheme. It's Sonic, the real cool hedgehog with the spiked haircut and the power sneakers that give him super speed. Interestingly, it refers to Sonic's spikes as a haircut. That seems a bit weird, but I suppose it makes sense, given that we later on get hedgehogs in the franchise with vastly different quill designs. Another thing it says is that Sonic's speed comes from his shoes. This was an addition added only in the Western adaptation of the games, and was not present in the original Japanese manual or backstory. Needless to say, this idea was dropped after the classic era. And there you have the world's first exposure to the blue blur, apart from this, and this, and this. As you can see from the brief stare he gives, this is a dude with a lot of attitude, and if that didn't give it away, surely that wagging finger back and forth would. And being set scrolling through the outskirts of Green Hill really does sell you on the atmosphere and the aesthetic of Sonic's world right from the get-go. Before we go any further, I would like to give you a little bit of my personal history with this game. I think it's pretty obvious that this was not my first exposure to the Sonic series. That title belongs to a different game. But I can tell you when I first got to play the original Sonic the Hedgehog, and that was in the PC port of Sonic Mega Collection Plus. I got about as far as Green Hill Act 3 before I got roadblocked by those spike pits. Hey, I was 7, cut me some slack, okay? It wouldn't be until my early teenage years when I would revisit the game, this time with the Ultimate Mega Drive collection on Xbox 360, and I would actually beat it too, using save states. And I didn't get the emeralds either, so that's showing how bad I am at classic Sonic. I dabbled with the 3DS port, but it wasn't until I played Sonic Origins for a video that I actually managed to beat this game without save states. No emeralds though, as I was on a tight schedule. Since that video, I've been able to get my hands on an original Sonic cartridge that we found just laying around in a relative's old house. But sadly, I don't own a console to play it on. I recently did get the opportunity to play it on the original hardware at a gaming arcade, but for the purpose of this review, I'll be playing on the Xbox 360. My footage, however, will come from Sonic Origins, and this review will be the first time I get all 6 Chaos Emeralds and truly beat Sonic the Hedgehog. One thing Sonic is known for is its wide cast of characters, so it's funny to think about how small it started out. Even the first Super Mario Bros. Had more characters, but here we only have Sonic and Robotnik. You could argue the Flickies, they have names after all, those are hardly focused on. I already went over Sonic a little bit at the start of the review, but I'll elaborate further. Sonic games on the Genesis had different box art depending on where you come from, but the cool thing about Sonic 1 is that Sonic looks about the same in all of them. The Japanese and European boxes use art created by Akira Watanabe, which depicts him standing in a full art, holding up a finger and crossing his legs. Pretty casual, things considered. However, in the US, he had a different piece of art, created by Greg Ray, which is pretty similar, but drawn in a more Western art style, not as a full art. The game itself portrays some character traits of Sonic, with his idle animation being the most notable. He's impatient, and is waiting for you to take control and play the game. This also shows on the continue screen, which is one of my favourite animations in the game. Perhaps this impatience comes from the urgency to save the Flickies and stop his foe from taking over the world. Speaking of, Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik, or just Robotnik as he was known back then, is Sonic's arch nemesis. He's established in the first game as a man who captures animals and turns them into robots to do his bidding and stop Sonic from thwarting his plans for, roboticization? The manual says nothing about world domination, and the games don't help much either. He's quite vague in the context of Sonic 1, but then again, he was just the villain of a 2D platformer. Sega wanted Sonic to be front and centre, hence why he's got all of his personality put into him from day one. But Robotnik? Well, we know from the mascot design contest that he was originally pitched in pyjamas as the protagonist at one point, but obviously they didn't go with it, instead putting him in red and making him the baddie. The fact he has a mustache, and is in the colour red, if nothing else, is just another one of Sega's potshots at Nintendo. Overall, he gets the job done as the game's antagonist, but he'd go on to be expanded upon way more in the future titles and spin-off media. Seriously, I do believe that part of the reason each version of Robotnik became so varied from one another during the 90s until Sonic Adventure is probably due to them not clearly defining him in this game. And considering the original design wasn't even intended as the bad guy, that makes perfect sense. Sonic 1 is home to 6 main zones. Each one is broken up into 3 acts, or 2.5, as each third act is much smaller, but contains a boss at the end. You start off in the ever iconic, constantly returning Green Hill Zone, filled with loop-de-loops, so synonymous with the franchise, and many slopes to roll down too. My favourite set piece is these chutes where Sonic rolls into it and is launched at high speeds off ramps. The second zone is the slow and methodical Marble Zone. This contrasts with the high-octane first level with a more maze-like design and a patience-based progression system. Here you start to get a glimpse of the types of tricks and traps that this game has to offer, but isn't too unmanageable for this point in the game. Up in third is Springyard Zone. This one's aesthetic has always left me baffled. It takes on a more abstract appearance, with words in the background, and these unusually long turnpikes that are fun to slide down in ball form. Also, this was the zone that felt the most glitchy to me, as each time I played it for the review I encountered at least something that shouldn't have happened. Next up is the dreaded Labyrinth Zone. This one frustrated me more when I was a teenager than it does now as an adult. If we're going off aesthetics, it's probably my favourite zone in the game, though Marble is a close contender in that regard. Sonic navigates this slow, underwater labyrinth, all while fighting against a limited air supply, and introducing the series to the famous drowning theme. Tedious as it may be, I can't help but appreciate it as a solid level with some questionable design choices. Starlight Zone is next, and if I'm honest with you, this is the one zone that I have the least to say about in this game. It's fine, but hardly stands out in my opinion. Love the music though, it's soothing in a way. The last zone Sonic traverses in this game is Scrap Brain Zone. Easily, hands down, the hardest of the bunch, which makes sense as it is the end of the game, but you don't understand. After Marble Zone, I feel like this game remains stagnant at a certain difficulty level. But Scrap Brain, oh, it really ducks my goilies. It's bad enough that I wasted my 20 plus lives I accumulated throughout the game on Act 1. I then ended up using 3 whole continues in Act 3. But the level in this game that I hate the most is certainly Act 2. This level wants you dead. It's an endurance test of not only your skill, but of my bloody patience in all. There are 2 other zones I should mention. The first is Final Zone, a very short section that leads you to the final boss of the game. The second is the Special Stage, a set of secret levels locked behind finishing either Act 1 or Act 2 with at least 50 or more rings. And if Spring Yard is abstract, then these can only be described as a fever trip, and if that doesn't do you in, then the music is sure enough to make your ears bleed. I would be remiss to not go over the bosses in Act 3, so before we move on, how about a little boss ranking lightning round? Number 6 is Labyrinth Zone, with the Egg Mobile. To call this a boss is to call Smokey Eunuch a good sport and a clean racer. You can hit the Eggy once or twice, but it doesn't matter. At the end, he'll always scurry away without much of an altercation, and the path up isn't exactly hard, just a bit tricky for less than stellar players, like me. Number 5 is Starlight Zone's Egg Spiker. This is certainly the boss that screws me up on any run. Yes, once you get into the rhythm of it, the boss becomes a cakewalk, but it normally costs me a couple lives to get to that point. Number 4 is Green Hill Zone's boss, Egg Wrecker. Yes, the classic Egg Wrecker. I didn't know it was called that, I just called it Eggman's Big Ball. This boss is fun. If you disagree, you're lying. Tricky to a newbie, but after your first attempt, you pretty quickly learn how to take it down. Sucks that the Origins version doesn't let you hit it right away like the original versions do. Number 3 is the final boss, Egg Crusher. This one is pretty tedious, and if I'm honest, a bit of a letdown, which is why I can't place it any higher. When I first played this game, I was expecting the final boss to be, well, something a little bit more threatening than Cylinders, but it provides a challenge that is fun to tackle after the god-awful scrap brain stages. Number 2 is Spring Yard. Yeah, I'm surprised I put this one as high as I have. I love how Eggman drops down to steal parts of your walking area. This makes it a race against him in a way, as you try to bash him 8 times before he leaves you in a bottomless pit. And if you've been counting, in that case, I'm proud of you. Why not subscribe? Anyway, yes, if you've been counting, you've probably figured out that my number 1 favourite Sonic 1 boss is from Marble Zone, the Egg Scorcher. It's not the most complex, but using the lava as part of the hazards to avoid is a perfect use of the level's mechanics from the zone we just traversed being used in a boss fight. Much like with the Egg Wrecker, it's a rookie player's death trap, but it doesn't take too long to get into the groove and burn this rotten egg like a, boiled egg? It's no secret that Sonic games are known for their kick-ass soundtracks, but is that true for the first outing? I'm happy to report that it is. The word I'd use to describe it is swanky, because despite the limitations of the Yamaha sound chip used in Sega games, they managed to craft a brilliant set of music to suit the aforementioned levels you'll be running through. Masato Nakamura is responsible for delivering us these tracks, and hot take? Sonic 1 has my favourite set of songs of the classic trilogy. All of the soundtracks are good, but I like this game's the best. Whilst containing the least amount of songs of the classic era soundtracks, is a much more tightly composed series of bangers. These songs help create a fitting atmosphere, which when listened to outside of the confines of the game, truly invoke the visuals they're set to during gameplay. And as for sound effects, I think you already know it has many iconic sounds, the most iconic of which has to be the ring collect sound, but a personal favourite of mine is the special stage transition noise. However, that then leads to possibly the one song in the game I find to be weak, the special stage song itself. Something about it feels weird and honestly depressing, like the game is haunted or something. Get out of here with that EXE garbage! Though if I had to pick a favourite song, my vote goes to Marble Zone. Mid-level, great vibes. When I think of this game, or classic Sonic in general, inevitably the gameplay comes to mind. As you'd expect, this game controls well. As a physics-based platformer, they had to have nailed its gameplay, and they did a decent job at doing so. I never felt like I overshot anything. Apart from that one section in Scrap Brain with the conveyor belt, most of the time I feel like I have a good control over Sonic's jump. Not something that can be said for Mario's early games, and the system of building up speed can be rewarding. My only issue is that more often than not, I'm playing it very cautious as to not have me run straight into the way of enemies, so I can never truly enjoy the speed sections of the game. And inevitably, you will run into something if you try going so fast. So at times the gameplay and the obvious fact that this is a game goes against the premise of going fast. However, there is one thing I really appreciate about this game. Something that's not exclusive to Sonic, but I really like how it was implemented here. The levels are designed in a way which teases you with power-ups visible just out of sight. An example I will use is this life box atop the loop. Under normal gameplay, it would be impossible to get up here, but if you backtrack instead of going forward like you normally would, you can find a speed shoe which provides Sonic with enough speed to make the jump and grab the 1-up. Another trick I think is really cool is the hidden invisible tile in Marble Zone, which allows you to skip a long stretch of the level. How people discovered things like this in the 90s boggles my mind, and it certainly blew my mind when I found out about it years ago. I could go on, but we'd be here all day. Let me know in the comments which secrets you've uncovered in the game. Help a girl out, as I'm sure I haven't uncovered all of them yet. Anything I say about this game won't put into words the impact and legacy it's left on pop culture. The sheer fact it's the reason Sonic exists at all made Sega a household name in the 90s and turned this little hedgehog into a global icon. His games are treasured and beloved by people all around the globe. I've worked in a school, and it makes me so glad to hear children tell me about the Sonic games and characters they enjoy, and we will have this game to thank for it. I could go on about this game's legacy, but if we narrow our scope to just this game and with the markets left on the industry, I'd like to refer you again to the ways in which gaming magazines talked about it upon release. Almost immediately they were pitting it against Super Mario World. Sonic rocked the perspective of Mario being the golden standard platformer, and soon after we got a myriad of copycats all wanting to have what Sonic did. So it was your fault for all this junk! Not to mention Sonic 1 being playable on pretty much every major console since the millennium has played a part in ensuring this game remains in the cultural zeitgeist. The designers set out to create a character they could use as a company mascot first, and develop a game that could affirm Sega a place in gaming history second. And I would say that they managed to achieve both tasks with flying colours. Overall, Sonic the Hedgehog was the perfect head start to the franchise. It's the Sonic game I love to replay the most. Not only to experience those first 6 zones and their fantastic music time and time again, but to remember where it all started for one of my favourite characters in fiction. I give this game a solid 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you haven't done so yet, do be sure to give it a like if you enjoyed it. This video has been one of the biggest projects I've ever worked on for the channel, so I would really appreciate you giving it a like and sharing it. It's certainly the longest I've ever spent making a video, as I did the initial scripting for it in May of last year. Let me know what you think of the video or of Sonic 1 in the comments. This is Gemmo, signing out.